Right, fourth year, welcome to your web revision on the effects of the railways. Now, we're going to look at three types of effects that the railways had. One on transport, the effect they had or the economic effect, and their social effect. So first of all, their effect on transport. Rail was quicker, cheaper, and more comfortable than stagecoach. Stagecoach is your horse-drawn carriage, okay, which people used to use to get about. It was very bumpy on the roads because the roads weren't very well maintained. It took quite a lot of time, and it was fairly expensive. So only really the middle classes and upper classes be able to afford to get about in this type of transport. The next point is the government made companies sell third class tickets to the working classes. So for the first time, the working classes can actually now afford to get about because the government's made sure that they sell them tickets that they could afford. The canals lost business as they were slower and they froze in winter. Canals were a system of waterways with big long boats called barges on them that were pulled by horses at the sides of the waterway, and they used them to move goods about. However, the problem was they were slow because it only went literally at a horse's kind of walking pace, and in winter they froze over, which meant they couldn't get any goods along them at all. Ships also lost out to railways. This is because the trains were not affected by tides or storms. If the tide was out, then it meant a ship wouldn't be able to dock in a port and unload its goods. And it's the same idea as with storms. If it was really stormy around a certain part of the country, then ships wouldn't be able to dock in there. Railways didn't have these problems, so they took business off them. Long distance road transport also went into decline, and this didn't recover until the 20th century. The same idea as stagecoach, so it was a horse and a carriage, or a horse and cart that transported goods about the country. It was more expensive and it took a lot longer time, so therefore railways took business off of them. It recovered in the 20th century because of the advent of the motor car and the lorry, so it could take things to people's shops. So, the economic effects of the railways. It transported coal quickly and cheaply. Remember, coal was used during this period for pretty much everything. It's used to work factories, to move, to make metals. It's used to for public lighting in towns. It's pretty much used for everything, and now they can transport about coal quickly and cheaply. It reduces the price of coal. Railway building, the actual building of the railways, the lines and the tracks and whatnot, gave both the coal, iron and steel industries a big boost. Factories were built close to the railways. Now, they did this so that the products could easily be put onto the trains and transported about. By 1860, 100,000 people were employed just working on the railways, so that's a large number of people making a living from it. It speeded up the post, which benefited businesses. Now, it meant that it wouldn't take as long if you were in London and you were sending a letter to somebody in Glasgow, because now it could be there more or less the next day, whereas before it would maybe take a week or at least a good few days before it could get there. So it speeded up the post, which benefits business in turn. Now, farms and fishermen, fishing ports, could now also send fresh produce directly into the city. Before, by the time they got the meat or the fish onto the road transport that were pulled by horses, and by the time it got there, it could be off. Because remember, they didn't have refrigeration then. So now they can put them on the railways. It means that people living in towns can have access to fresh produce. And lastly, company brands such as Guinness could now be known nationally, not just locally. These brands products could now be transported into every city in Britain, and then therefore everybody would know about these different types of brands such as Guinness, whereas before, when they weren't transported into every city, it was more of a local thing, so only people really about Dublin would have heard about Guinness. It wasn't until railways came and managed to get them into every town that these national brands became so famous. So the social effects of railways. The middle class didn't have to live next to where they worked. They could now commute from outside cities. No longer did you have to live within walking distance to your office. You could now live out in the suburbs or maybe a village close to the town, and as long as it was on the railway line, you could jump on your train and you'd be in there in 20 minutes, half an hour. It also meant that you could have a seaside or country holiday for the first time. Before, if you wanted to go to the seaside and you lived 2 or 3 days walk from there, then you would have to travel 2 or 3 days walk from there, so that you couldn't really go on holiday. Whereas now they've got the railways, and it cuts the journey time right down to a couple of hours. It means that people can now go on holiday, and that includes the working class because it's so cheap. And it also means that better newspaper distribution. In other words, people can, newspaper companies can send their newspaper, what they printed that day or that night, out to all the cities and anywhere on the railway line, so also villages and little towns all over the country. And it means that people in villages and towns become better informed, because it means that they can read about the newspaper, they can read the newspaper and read about current events, things that are happening in the news. So there's 3 areas where the railways had effects. If you know them for your exam, or if you study them so you know them for your exam, then if a question comes up, you should be odds-on favourite to get it correct. Okay, so thanks.